Welcome to the new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. I am your host, Steven, along here with...
The Amazing Dakota.
Amazing Dakota, there you go. Maybe you're more amazing than the new Spider-Man movies, maybe. That's probably a better way to do it.
It doesn't take much to be that amazing. I mean, come on.
You know what the difference between you and me? I make this look good. Whatever that Will Smith line is. Yeah, so
Black.
Welcome to our new episode 4. You know what we'll call this? Well, it is. It's our 4th one. Tonight, our main topic of interest was Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Cue fanfare. Oh, wait, we don't have one of those things? Okay.
I was designed to save the world. People would look to the sky and see hope. I'll take that from them first. There's only one path to peace. Their extinction.
I tried to create a suit of armor around the world, but I created something terrible. Artificial intelligence. It's called the Ultron program.
I'm sick of watching people pay for our mistakes.
Isn't why we fight so we can end the fight and go home?
Well, you amazingly failed.
So, coming out of... Oh, let's... before we go into coming out of, let's go into coming into Age of Ultron. Where were you at with your Age of Ultron? Dakota, were you excited? What were you looking forward to?
Well, I think anyone who saw the first one probably had to be a little excited for this one. I mean, sequels always go bigger, right?
Yeah.
And this one sure delivered on that point. Huge opening scene that set everything up. I think they threw everything in that fight except the kitchen sink, which is surprising.
They did, yeah. That was what was really different about this one, which was a good different, was that if you want to call it, I guess, the prologue, kind of the scene before the title. Most times they call that a prologue. Well, it just started. I mean, it was the Avengers were already on a mission doing something.
Yep.
And it was something that had to do with the rest of the movie. It wasn't like just some random mission to get you. I mean, it had to do with stuff, but it just kind of jumped you back in there. Now, we talked about this. This movie, overall, had great special effects. Just overall, great special effects. That opening prologue, the whole scene, not even just like the opening shot, the whole, what do you suppose that prologue was? 10 minutes?
But it had to be longer than that.
But I mean, like the action scene.
Oh yeah, where they're just
before they kind of got into
with all the explosions and the dying.
Yeah, because you jump into the middle of the action and there's just like this, and he kind of does. Joss Whedon does a really cool like ensemble shot with it, like he does in the Battle of New York in the first one, where he kind of jumps from Avenger to Avenger through the fight, and you're seeing them all doing things. But the visual effects were atrocious. They were just like half done, shoddy. I was joking with Dakota. We came out of the movie about how there's a part where like Captain America's arm seems to like do something that I don't even know if a human can do. And I get he's a super soldier, but well, I think when you see it, you'll know. It's like it just moves weird, and you could tell like every time Thor jumped, you could tell it really wasn't Chris Hemsworth, which I get that. They do things, but, they make it, they usually, render it so it looks real. Oh, it was too bad because it was like, here's your epic opening scene, and it was kind of like, bleh, in terms of, I mean, you're still excited to see them, but it just didn't look right.
Yeah, it certainly was not on par with the rest of the film. Kind of makes
me... the rest of the film was fine. I brought the idea of, like, did they use a different, these movies are so big, they have different digital companies work on different scenes of the movie, And it's like, man, if they had just one company do that opening scene, they should get their money back or something. Fix it for the Blu-ray.
One thought that crossed my mind is maybe somewhere in a vault at Disney headquarters, there's the original opening scene, which started off much slower. And then Disney execs were like, no, bigger, more explosions.
It does. When you see that prologue, it's like, yeah, this is the prologue you want. That's the prologue you want. You jump in. Excuse me, I have a cold for the record. But, yeah, but it does make you wonder when you see it looking different, that like, the rest of the movie is like, was this a reshoot? Like, did Joss Whedon have a slower opening, and they're like, action, 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 and yeah, it was just kind of weird. So going into the movie, I guess you were
I would say I was pretty stoked.
Pretty stoked. I mean, if you listen to our first episode where we were talking about anticipated movies, this was both our number ones for the summer. Just because it was your ensemble cast coming back together, your ensemble of superheroes coming back together to do something big. When they announced James Spader was going to be the voice of Ultron, that brought up another notch for me, just because that guy does have a cool kind of sinister voice. You're always kind of interested in who they're going to bring into the mix. Yeah, I went in pretty excited. This was one you just are excited for, especially if you like a good action movie, if you're obviously into one of these superheroes. Yeah, just it really just had kind of everything you kind of wanted on that level. But Dakota, is there something that you'd like to talk about first, like something that really stuck out to you in the movie?
I was actually kind of surprised. I thought you get introduced to two new characters in this who were actually from the Avengers comic, Peter and Wanda Maximoff, and their code names Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. I'll let you figure out which is called which.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how quickly, I mean, they're there in the opening battle, and I was kind of surprised at that. I thought there'd be like a slow build to them showing up, but nope, they show up right off the bat. And
yeah, they had them in there pretty quick. I mean, some of us are familiar with them already and how they're going to look a little bit, just because they were a post-credit tease in
Captain America?
Winter Soldier, yeah. Thank you. Along with Baron von Strucker, the guy they're working with, and but otherwise, yeah, you're right. I mean, it was surprising how there they were, like first thing of the movie, is there they are.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of caught me, to quote Quicksilver in this movie, you didn't see that coming. Their accents were surprisingly Eastern European, which I should have seen that coming, but I guess I didn't really process it in my head.
It was interesting. I was surprised at how well his came across, but Elizabeth Olsen plays Scarlet Witch. Her seemed kind of, I don't know. It looked like she was really working at it. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, it was interesting how they gave him the Russian accent. But their backstory is that they were. Was it Russian? Is that what they...
I think the country they kept bringing up, I don't think really exists. I think it might be one of those fictionalized...
yeah, Slovakia. That was the place that they were at with Baron von Strucker, but whether it's where they were... There's a lot of fictional countries in this movie, because Wakanda comes up too, and those of you who are familiar with comic books know Wakanda is where the Black Panther comes from. And of course, if you keep up with these things again, there is plans for a Black Panther movie, which is why they're now teasing Wakanda, so that it doesn't feel so boom, there he is, where they kind of like to tease him into it. And of course, they kind of tease Black Panther's villain in this movie too, Ulysses Claw, played by Andy Serkis. It was good to see him. Actually see him.
Yeah.
Not in motion capture, where he looks like a monkey or a meth addict hobbit. Like Gollum is. But
honestly, when his character spoke, I actually thought it was, I forget his name, but the the main character that was in District 9. He did the voice of Chappie.
Yeah, Charlton Copley.
Yeah, I honestly thought that's who it was.
Yeah, well, he is. I mean, it was kind of a South African accent, which
Yeah.
is what Charlton is, and yeah, maybe Andy Serkis got some voice training from him, to get that down. And they'd be motion capture guys too.
There you go. He taught him how to do motion capture, and
In return,
Charlton Copley taught him how to do a South
there you
African
go.
accent.
They just traded that off, but yeah. So let's go into what do you think were the strongest things in this movie?
Well, the strongest things
That it had going for it.
pretty much it had the opposite effect of the first one in that start off with a huge bang, kind of segued into a nice little, what was it, a going away party for Thor that was actually pretty fun to watch. I mean,
Yeah, it was more or less kind of revel in our victory. Thor's going to be going away. Let's kind of hang out one last time.
yeah, that was my problem with the first one. It was like it mostly dealt with S.H.I.E.L.D. and
Yeah.
it's like, who are these characters and why do we care? Whereas this one, it was, of course, all about the Avengers.
Well, the shield doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier took care of that. So
And it was just, it was a little more lighthearted to start off with, and you didn't really have to focus too much. And then, of course,
I believe what you're looking for is you didn't have to think.
you didn't have
Unless
to,
you wanted to.
And then one thing that I was interested to see was, how was this villain, which those of you who weren't aware of it, Robert Downey Jr.'s character was supposed to create this artificial intelligence, which turned out to be Ultron. And watching that was actually pretty interesting because he is literally born and then he's like, whoa, what's this?
Yeah, the birthing, whatever you want to call it, of Ultron is a really cool kind of sequence in the movie. How they had, James Spader's voice was in there, and how it was like him trying to understand what was happening to him, and just like every second of his dialogue, and then Jarvis kind of talking back to him is him like, you see like fast forward maturity or something, where it's like he's like every second he talks and is trying to understand, you can almost sense him getting stronger and a bigger understanding of what's going on a little bit. That was a really cool sequence in the movie.
And then it just kind of makes you wonder. It's like, maybe if he had taken some baby steps, would he have turned out so evil?
Yeah,
Because he absorbs a lot of bad, like, really quickly.
yeah, because actually they show him trying to understand partially he's trying to understand his purpose being made when he started looking up things about the Avengers and the things they did in Stark. Yeah, he just kept seeing all this human causing violence, and he knew he was made for peace. And then you just kind of see him warp that into, what he thinks his mission should be, where he takes it upon himself to, let's see, humans equal not peace, is basically what he comes to destroy humans, and Metal Man will take over.
He does figure it out pretty quickly that the world can be a pretty scary place to live. And then he, maybe because he was created by Tony Stark and kind of has some of his tendencies, just kind of takes some pretty extreme steps towards solving his problem, which is world peace.
Yeah, that's the thing. You do feel a vulnerability in Ultron, which I wasn't anticipating going into this movie. You almost thought he would just be this kind of unstoppable, almost Terminator. But you felt more of a vulnerability to him, and yeah, you almost wonder, well, that is that the Tony in him, so to speak, his vulnerability that he had. For me, one of the interesting things about this movie was how there was so many action set pieces, and the action is great. This movie compared to the first one is just like full bore in pacing and moving. But I thought like kind of the underdwelling story of everything that was going on was the Avengers kind of having to be, what's the word, introspective on, are they monsters? They had to look at themselves and in Hulk, it's easier for Bruce Banner to look at himself and be like, well, I know I become a monster. And in a sense, what they're all realizing is that they all have kind of a monster, but it's kind of that idea of, am I a monster that is doing good, or am I a monster that needs to be destroyed or stopped? It's almost like there was a moment where they were like, is Ultron right? Not that they were necessarily in agreement with him ever, but I think there were a few times where they were taken aback by Ultron's ideas, where they looked at themselves a little bit and said, well, maybe I do need to be stopped. I felt that a little bit. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I certainly did. I mean, Black Widow, for sure. She was going through the same things that Bruce Banner was.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting how the movie played on the idea of how they have a lot in common, even though she has no powers and doesn't turn into a Rage Hulk monster, that they have a lot in common in that area.
There's another thing that caught me off guard. You actually do, I think it's like the first time ever you learn about her backstory, because I really never knew anything about her besides amazingly hot super assassin from trained by the KGB to be a killer. But she's now on
from a child, little age.
But yeah, another thing that really just kind of caught me off guard was, wow, her and Bruce Banner can't have a thing going on. Never did I think of that before.
Yeah, that was the thing. There was always people thinking that there would be romance between her and Clint, and then after Winter Soldier, people were like, is there romance between her and Steve Rogers, aka Captain America? But there ends up being this romance between her and Bruce, and it doesn't feel out of place or weird. It works in a strange way.
I'm not gonna lie, the bar scene was actually pretty interesting. I mean, it's kind of a take on that, guy walks up to a bar, hey doll, what you doing in a place like this? And her response was just like, wow.
Oh, when they're kind of hanging out and there's kind of a little banter between them. Yeah.
She makes him the drink and very, very seductively leans in to talk to him.
And he's not sure to take it. He's like an awkward dork. It's hilarious.
Edward Norton's Hulk would have known what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, on the other side, he would have tried not to get too excited.
Yeah, which an Incredible Hulk, you talk about that, like, he has that pulse watch. It's like, dee, 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 dee. Can't get too excited. Did you, for you, I mean, besides we talked about the digital effects problems with that opening shot, but we'll just go into, let's just talk about story. I mean, story's everything in movies. If you can, honestly, I've seen movies where production value is terrible, but it's saved by a good story. So let's look at that here. Did you see any weaknesses in the story of this movie?
Well, besides the fact that there's so much going on, it's hard to explain. Not really. I thought it was pretty strong overall. I mean, guy pretty much just creates this machine that goes haywire, decides to kill humanity. I mean, how many stories have we seen where that's happened? I mean,
yeah,
all the way back in the 70s in Westworld, where you had Yul Brynner toting around a revolver trying to kill people.
Yeah, you can even go back to silent film. I mean, this isn't really totally what Metropolis was about, because that was about kind of classes. But in that one, I mean, machines were kind of controlling man in that old silent film too, where there's always kind of been this in a certain, I think our fear and uncertainty of artificial intelligence, and if we ever get there, what it'll mean, causes us to always come back to it, because it's another unknown. It's why there's so many movies about time travel and how that gets used over and over again. It's like, it's something that it's since it still doesn't happen, there's like this unknown. We have this fear of the unknown, and we got these guys who try to like tap into that a little bit. Whether they do go like, let's just go total horror with that idea, or let's look at it like, let's take a what if, with it. And that's what I always felt like, even before this movie. I mean, Ultron's been around in the comics since what?
70s at least, I think.
Yeah, for sure. 70s.
Which kind of, you know what I thought when I was watching this movie? If Hal from 2001: A Space
Hal
Odyssey
9000
was addicted to drugs and had severe daddy issues, he would be a lot like Ultron, don't you think?
Well, maybe. There's you go. There's your what if movie to make.
Oh, sounds good to me.
Yeah. But sci-fi is the place where you can just take a ridiculous idea in some cases, or maybe an idea that really almost you can pull out some of the thing like, well, that's not totally reality, but you kind of take your spin on it and just kind of do a story to get people thinking and talking about it. And I think that's kind of what Ultron kind of started as, is, this artificial intelligence that looked at man as the problem, and that's the thing, like we said, that's been done kind of over and over again. But this movie, it didn't feel like a rehash, and part of that was just because, I mean, you had all the superheroes and their things going on. But it was just like I said, the way they went at it, where they used that idea that we've seen over and over again, but caused the Avengers, like I said, to look at themselves a little bit and kind of step back at what they were doing for a moment. Like, because really, Tony Stark's original plan with Ultron was to make the Avengers obsolete, which, when Ultron ends up coming to be in his own nasty way, that's exactly what he was going to do to the Avengers. He wanted them to be extinct, but on a different level than Tony Stark had originally intended. He wanted to make this Ultron so that the Avengers wouldn't be needed, because Ultron and his army could watch over the Earth, because Tony's still going back to, we can stop drug lords and arms dealers, but we're not going to, he just kept going back to the Battle of New York. Like, I think in a sense, Tony was looking at Battle of New York saying, we got lucky. And honestly, maybe even the reason they got lucky with the Battle of New York was that Loki kind of blew, it felt like Loki blew the Battle of New York on purpose, because he knew Thanos was just using him. And Loki wanted to kind of, push something at Thanos a little bit there too. And so I think maybe when you look at it that way, it's like...
Or there's like another side to that where you could just kind of say to yourself, did he eventually kind of come to it and realize, I'm about to wipe out millions of people, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Which, with the way they had him, where he was a lot more sympathetic in the last Thor movie, maybe that's what they were going with. I mean...
Yeah, it's always hard to... Well, again, Loki, you just never know what his whole thing is, but...
I'm sure he could have scooped himself up off the floor and redirected that battle a little better.
Yeah. As long as you could suspend certain things in the sci-fi realm of this movie, you thought it was...
Well, actually, that's something that this movie has that the first one does. It actually does have a story. I mean, the first one is we're bringing these heroes together, which isn't really much of a story. I mean... you could replace Loki with a number of villains. I mean, you could have, like, dwarves pretty much attack New York.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, this one... And that's the thing. That's... When you look at the two, this one just had a lot of things definitely over the first one as far as just movement. I mean, this movie just moved. And, yeah, it actually had more of a story than just... assembling the Avengers in a sense, and having that Thanos tease at the end.
Oh, you just blew the movie for so many people.
I was talking about the first one.
Oh, apparently I just blew
You
this
just blew
movie.
the movie.
Oh, yes, yes. Josh Brolin shows up in this movie at some point as Thanos.
But since Marvel totally released what the third Avengers is going to be, you kind of knew that Thanos was going to have to make in some sort of a tease again.
Actually, you know what? I was kind of hoping for, even though maybe it was a little too late, was like a cameo from, or not a cameo, but maybe have Wilson Fisk from the Daredevil show, like in the background.
I don't think they're ready to
somewhere.
do that yet. Well, it's just like me. I was sitting there hoping like maybe they might tease Spider-Man, but I think some of that just didn't come through quick enough for it to work for this movie. And I think part of it too is maybe they're just like, well, it's not time yet.
I don't know. I thought it would have been a nice little acknowledgement to the show, which a lot of people are talking about right now. Daredevil, also a Marvel property, has its own TV show on Netflix right now, for those of you that don't know.
And he is an Avenger, becomes an Avenger in the comics, right? So it isn't totally out of the question if he joined the Avengers at some point?
I think he's part of the expanded universe of the Avengers.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sure. Like, yeah, he's not necessarily a full-fledged team member, but...
Yeah, like Wolverine. It's like,
sure.
Well, you don't get along well with anybody, but we need you, so come on.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Plus, him and Black Widow for the longest time did have a thing. Matt Murdock, Daredevil.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that could... Who knows? They could... I mean, that's the thing with this Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's so many places they could go. As far as characters in this movie... the main superheroes, how did you feel all of them did compared to the previous ones? Do you think this movie helped build them, or do you feel like this was so separate from their own movies that didn't really build them? It was just them coming together for a while, or do you think there was some actual character development in this movie also?
Well, there certainly was for Tony Stark.
This movie was huge for him in a way because this is the first movie where it felt you saw him. I mean, Iron Man 3, you saw him a little bit more human than he usually acts, but in this one, he almost seemed like this is the movie I felt like he doubted. He had the most doubts coming up compared to any of the other movies he's been in.
Actually, honestly, I don't think there was much really for Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. Other than the fact that he kind of, in this movie, you finally did kind of see him coming to terms with the fact that, the 1940s, my love, swing dancing music.
Yeah.
All my old lifestyle's pretty much gone. This is where I'm at.
But what I thought was cool about the Avengers is that they gave character development to the Avengers that don't get their own movies. Like, I felt like this Avengers gave a lot of character development to Black Widow, to Hawkeye. You got to see more of them, and they're ones that aren't going to get their own movies, and so it gave you a chance to get to know them.
Vision.
Yeah, and Vision, too, and get to know him too, and so you got to see these people that don't have their own movies and kind of more about them, which I thought was nice, and it was cool to get to know this movie. I thought Hawkeye was a lot better in this movie because he wasn't brainwashed, and it was just cool to get to know him more and who he is and things like that, and him going through some of his. Man, I am just a guy who can shoot arrows. I mean, I was joking about that. I think on another podcast about how he's just a guy who shoots arrows, and that's funny because that's what he thinks in the movie. He's like, I'm a part of this team where all I can do is shoot arrows, and it was kind of cool to see him.
They did kind of
deal with that.
They did kind of make him out to have the biggest heart of anyone on the team, really. I mean, if you think about it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, the biggest heart, and in a way, it felt like he was the heart of the team in a lot of ways, which is just kind of cool where he realizes that there's a place for him because they need someone who maybe is a little more normal. Maybe his super strength, superpower is that he's normal. He's just a guy, in a sense.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from.
So, yeah, and so just overall,
We should talk about the Maximoffs. I mean, I honestly didn't think I thought they were just going to be kind of background villains, but in this, you do kind of, at first you don't really care too much for them. Then you come to realize these guys are actually pretty decent. They have the reasons for doing what they're doing.
yeah, they kind of had these through series of circumstances is why they're the way they are, and yeah, when you see some of that, it was kind of hard to blame them a little bit for why they decided to side with who they did at first. Anyway, yeah, well, okay, Quicksilver. We'll go with him first. Now, this is the second time we saw Quicksilver. This was Marvel itself's take on Quicksilver. How do you think he compared to the other Quicksilver we saw in the X-Men movie?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't do that because the one from the X-Men universe, well, I kind of like him a little better.
I think the way Bryan Singer decided to use Quicksilver was better, but I think the Quicksilver in the X-Men movie wouldn't have worked in this movie.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, the Quicksilver in the X-Men universe is very much American.
Well, I mean, even besides that, just looking at
Well, no, I'm just saying
the way he just, I mean, yeah, I guess there is
his
that.
attitude on things.
Yeah.
This one is definitely kind of has that same attitude though, where he's kind of a smart aleck and
Oh yeah, definitely.
somewhat mischievous.
And that was part of what they've had kind of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch bring to the mix of superpowered people, is that they were kind of the young punks. There's really no young punks in the Avengers, and now there's two. These two that came into the mix here. How did you feel about Scarlet Witch and how they handled her? She was one I was worried about just because of the fact that, yeah, Thor is magical to a sense with his hammer, but she was one where it was like, okay, she's literally going to be shooting magicalness at people and controlling minds. I was a little worried about how that was going to work in this.
I honestly thought her powers were pretty cool. It doesn't. It's not like she's shooting rainbows from her fingertips or anything. I think the way they portrayed her powers is actually kind of cool, and the way I'm gonna kind of spoil this for you. She kind of disables the Avengers momentarily, and puts them in the state where they imagine their worst fears, and that's where you see Black Widow's childhood pretty much.
Yeah, really, Scarlet Witch is used as a character development tactic for a part of how she's used in the movie is just because of what she does to them there. I thought she came across a lot better than I was kind of worried about how she's going to come across, honestly. And I knew she was going to kind of set the precedent for if Doctor Strange is eventually going to work, just because he does similar things with the moving of the hands and shooting stuff, and it kind of made me go, well, okay, maybe Doctor Strange will work. If Scarlet Witch isn't coming across totally goofy, because it's funny you sit here and think like you're worried about that when there's this guy who just stretches into a giant green thing and somehow his pants never rip off of him. I mean, you have that, but this just kind of takes it to a different level when you have that kind of magicalness, if that's a word. And I thought this Elizabeth Olsen, she's a pretty good actress. I mean, I thought she did a good job. Her and Quicksilver, I thought they both acted well for their roles. Like I said, they had these accents that, and maybe some of it is just because they're people have heard not talk with accents, so it makes it feel a little bit different. But
yeah, I mean, I thought it was it was kind of those trashy European accents like that you would hear in Die Hard.
Yeah, like
You
like
can't-
the druggy, the guy selling drugs sitting in the room, like from the Russian mob or something.
It's like you can't really place them, but yeah, it wasn't horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't exactly like Borat's accent.
Oh god. Yeah, let's not talk about him. Okay, so you come out of the movie, you saw what you saw. How did you feel?
I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna spoil. It's like, why was the spoiler Thanos again? Why?
That was disappointing.
I thought it would have been cool if, like, I don't know, something Black Panther related, maybe.
I was almost thinking the same thing. It's like you almost since they introduced Wakanda and certain other Black Panther elements in the movie, it almost felt like they were leading you to believe like, well, maybe there's gonna be a Black Panther tease, but I don't know if they're just not ready to do that or
Maybe.
And some of it is it seems like the Avengers have a tendency to only tease themselves. That sounds weird to say, but the teases that are in the Avengers movies always just have to do with the Avengers movies. It seems like, and so maybe if they tease, you know what I mean. Like it seems like they leave the teasing of other characters' movies in the characters' movies, and the Avengers teases are always just have to do with the Avengers stuff.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was some of that too. I'll tell you, I left the movie feeling like, wow, that was a really good sequel. And at the same time, I left the movie not feeling the same. I remember leaving the first Avengers thinking like, that was like, wow. And I think some of that is now that they've been on the big screen together, you don't have that same sense of, but bam, like, yeah. But at the same time, it was cool to see them together. And it was a good all-around movie. Definitely.
Yeah, this movie
definitely worked, and you can watch it again.
This movie definitely went bigger. Not just that, it went deeper too. You actually got to get into the mind of some of these characters too, which is actually pretty cool because these are characters you kind of get behind and be like, yeah. I would totally stand in a parade, cheer as these guys go by for stopping this evil robot from destroying the world.
The other thing I had brought up to you earlier was how it felt like Ultron. He almost Joss Whedon almost decided to portray him as a religious zealot, just in the way Ultron spoke, the things he said, how he always seemed to be hanging out in churches. Did you feel like he came across, like Ultron kind of came across as a little bit of a religious zealot type?
For a machine, he actually did. I think he's the only character in these movies that's ever actually proclaimed that there's a God.
Yeah, other than Captain America in the first Avengers, having that one little thing. It was just very. It was just kind of strange to see it that way, because usually when there's a robot, the robot doesn't have emotions at that level where they would become a religious zealot. But it seemed like Ultron hit the way he was in the realm of artificial intelligence is that he almost was more emotional. Most artificial intelligence almost doesn't have emotion. You know what I mean? To a certain degree they do. But he was like, if you had AI robot that had emotions and feelings, it felt like he had feelings.
Oh yeah.
Which that's where you could say there was a uniqueness to the AI in this movie, is that Ultron had feelings and emotions, and usually they're not so.
Well, to be honest with you, when he first becomes aware, he actually seems somewhat frightened.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You almost see. That's what I mean. Like you see this fast forward of someone going from like born baby to trying to get up on their own 2 feet in a sense into like adolescence. And
he quickly
and then attempting to become a man, you could say, is what he was doing.
Yeah, he quickly goes from being afraid to somewhat anxious to being just downright hostile.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to remember that at this moment that we're talking about is all done with just programming computer waves and James Spader's voice, which is what was really cool about that too. But
then, of course, you had Paul Bettany. Paul Bettany's character, if you could call it that, talking to him. And I thought it was a nice kind of exchange between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of... It was... Because it felt like Jarvis, since he had been around a while, was almost trying to, like, calm down the youngin' or something, and we'll kind of... I mean, we'll leave the rest of all that kind of Jarvis and Ultron stuff and all that stuff to the movie, just because it's just kind of cool how a lot of that plays out, but...
Yeah, it's so well done. Us trying to explain it to you would do it an injustice.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. If you like comic book movies, obviously, you go, this movie, you like action movies. This movie is all action, and it's not Michael Bay. It's like action that actually feels like it means something. And then I think this just hit another nail on the head, where I felt like this movie, you could almost put it in the realm of just a good sci-fi story.
Oh yeah.
Which you could say that a lot of comic movies have a tendency to kind of hang that way anyway. But this delved into actually what science fiction was, where you look at
oh yeah, Philip K. Dick for one would probably really love this movie.
Yeah, like a Philip Dick story where it's like Philip K. Dick, yes, he always wrote like, where you just kind of look at this, what if this was how AI came to be, what would they do? And it really kind of delves into ideas, and then like I said, how it just causes man to look at itself. Just really, really cool how it deals with that too. And so it was just, and you could say that Whedon, I mean, he's done a lot of sci-fi, but what this movie, the other way this movie worked was that he is an ensemble director, Whedon, and everything that came together with the group working together, different characters coming into the group, it all felt right and worked. I mean, the guy just knows how to direct a group of people to where it doesn't feel awkward.
Yeah, I think that's why these Avengers movies are so good. It's just that he works well with an ensemble. I don't think if given the chance to direct a Batman movie, and if he did it, that's when I would probably be like, okay.
Yeah, maybe not so much. He almost needs a group.
Because even in the TV shows he's done, when it's about a loner, whether it's Dollhouse, Buffy, Angel, battling against forces they can't control, there's always a group with them. I mean, he's never done a lone wolf type story. Right.
What made Buffy work was that Buffy had a group that she was with, her group of friends that she did her stuff with, and why that lasted 10 seasons or whatever Buffy lasted. And then had spin-offs. But so in closing, recommend? Are you giving it a recommend?
I give it a very strong recommend. I actually just recommended this movie to my brother, who is hopefully watching it right now.
He probably is. He probably is watching it. I also give it a recommend. It's just one of those where it's hard to not like it. It's just like things came together so well. This is a place when they could have slipped up terrible, but I think they had the right guy captaining the ship for this, and they just had the right story come together. Joss Whedon, this is as far as directing Marvel movies, this was his last one on the slate. He's given over the gauntlet, pun intended, of the next Avengers movies to the guys who actually directed Winter Soldier. So we'll see how they handle that, and it'll be kind of just fun to see what happens with Iron Man Civil War. Captain America Civil War, and what goes on in that.
They could call it that too, though.
They could call it that because of what it's going to entail, but it'll be fun to see what happens next. And so, Avengers Age of Ultron, definitely check it out. Definitely a great way to start the summer.
A movie this big is definitely playing near a theater.
Yeah, it's probably...
So
it's in every theater ever imagined. And so...
You know something? That just dawned on me. Wouldn't that be awesome to see this movie in IMAX?
It would be. any movie is good in IMAX. Well, maybe not any movie, but anyway. Check it out. What a great way to start the summer movie season. It set the bar high, which is always fun to have happen at the beginning of summer. That I think we'll just end the show. So this is Steven.
And this is the incredible or amazing, whatever. This is Dakota, okay?
Incredible, amazing. Have a good night, everybody. We'll catch you later.